Good evening. Welcome to the Herkimer Middle School, High School Reopening Plan Modification Forum, Monday, April 29, 2021, 6:30 p.m. During this forum, you'll be able to submit questions that may arise as you see the presentations from the two principals. You can do that by clicking the link provided from Parent Square, or post to the calendar event to submit a question. Remember some guidelines for submitting questions. Questions using the link above. Please be courteous in your comments. Presentation is being recorded and will be available online after the presentation. Presenters tonight are myself. I'll moderate the meeting. The high school principal, Ms. Tomaso, the middle school principal, Mr. Abbey. The board president is here as well. So essentially, the first thing we want to talk about is the New York State regulations. The New York State regulations regarding face coverings, social distancing, hygiene, health screenings, and contact tracing have all been modified slightly as the year went on. A major change occurred on April 9th over spring break with face coverings, with social distancing and face coverings. So essentially, where we're at now is that the state has issued new guidance about what proper social distancing is in the classroom. And the primary purpose of the meeting tonight and the primary change that you'll see in our reopening plan is to modify at the high school level, when possible, the social distancing requirements. So essentially, the idea is that Herkimer may choose to reduce physical distancing to no less than 3 feet between students during academic instruction. However, Herkimer will follow CDC recommendations for physical distancing depending on community transmission rates and grade levels. Herkimer will adhere to the exceptions where a minimum of 6 feet of distance must be maintained, including 6 feet is always the required distance between adults, that's teachers and staff and visitors, and between students and adults. 6 feet of distance is required when eating meals or snacks or drinking or other times masks must be removed. Individuals that are participating in activities that require projecting the voice, e.g. singing or playing a wind instrument, must be 6 feet apart, and there must be 6 feet of distance between the performers and the audience during a performance and concerts. 6 feet of physical distance must be maintained in common areas and outside of classrooms, e.g. lobbies, auditoriums, gymnasiums, cafeterias, and hallways where possible. So essentially, the social distancing rules are only changing for the instructional area at some times and for some grade levels. The rest of the plan is staying the same. Another thing that I want to point out to our community is that our K-5 students, our elementary building, has been in person every day since September 3rd. So there's not going to be any change to the schedule or any modification to that plan or how that building is operating. The only change that this district is seeking to make is to adjust the social distancing requirements at the high school level when possible under the new CDC guidelines from April 9th. The other change that came out of the guidance on April 9th is that mask wearing is more stringent and districts need to adopt a universal mask requirement, except for when students are eating, drinking, and several other exceptions. So the guiding principles we've had from the beginning is to maximize in-person instruction opportunities for our youngest learners and those needing the most support, and to support the academic, social, and emotional physical well-being of all students and staff while following all state regulations. So our goal since the beginning of our planning for opening our schools has been to maximize in-person instruction for all of our students as much as we possibly can in a safe manner. So we're suggesting this shift because we believe that we are still adhering to our guiding principles, that when the state adopted the CDC guidelines and allowed us to make this change, and it's going to allow us to offer more opportunities for in-person instruction for our students in the high school and middle school. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tomaso, our high school principal.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us this evening. With the opportunity to return to full-time in-person instruction at the middle school and high school level, we wanted to take advantage of the changes in regulations because we feel that it is beneficial for our students to be here. We believe that it's important that we reestablish your daily educational routine. We believe that increased instructional contact time and consistency is important in their educational lives. We want our students to have access to our other safety nets that school provides, such as increased access to meal programs, to our counselors, and to our school nurse. And we believe, and the research supports, the importance of school for student social and emotional well-being. With those principles, we are hoping to return to full-time in-person instruction beginning next Monday.
And as much as we're here tonight to talk about some potential changes, there are a significant amount of our procedures that will be exactly the same as we move forward. Social distancing on bus routes will continue. Only one student per seat is allowed unless they're from the same household. Students will continue to wear their masks on the bus, and windows can be opened for increased air circulation. Our parent drop-off and entry routines will remain unchanged, with students in grades 8 through 12 entering through the front entrance or the library entrance, and students in grades 6 through 7 entering through in the secondary circle. The rationale for that is to continue the one-way traffic flow in the hallways in the mornings and once again in the afternoons. Our daily COVID screenings will continue as well. We will continue to ask families to pre-screen students at home, including taking their temperature. And we also do a secondary temperature check upon student arrival that happens prior to students entering the classroom. And we will continue that no matter how many students we have. We also will continue with our 8:30 to 1:30 school day. Breakfast will be ordered and delivered to students. It will be eaten in classrooms. Lunches will continue to be delivered to students at the end of the day to take home. And we'll still have 6-period resource instruction and homework club taking place from 1:30 to 2:30. In addition to that, we will continue to cohort in grades 6 through 10 that result in little to no classroom transitions for students. Teachers will continue to rotate classrooms while students stay in one classroom cohort. Our bathroom access will also be managed by LTA Escort, an electronic sign-out system, which we've been doing all year long with great success. And in addition to that, our students in grades 11 and 12, and that includes CTE students, will continue with a hybrid schedule, while our medically excused remote learners will continue as remote learners as well. PE instruction will continue to remain asynchronous.
So with all of those things changing, some of the things that will not change, well, actually, I'm going to carry on with the changes that will be taking place, excuse me. Our students will be seated 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart. That is the one noticeable change that you will see. What this means is that the size of a cohort in our hybrid model, which was 8 to 12 students as we're running it now, the size of the cohort would be more like 16 to 24 students, following the 3-foot guidance provided by the Department of Health. As Mr. Miller had mentioned, our music performance distance has been reduced to 6 feet, and PE has also been reduced to 6 feet, but it's a fully remote class, so that's not relevant at this point in time. So basically, everything will be remaining the same as much as our schedules allow, except for our students will be seated 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart.
So that 3 feet of distance does have some impacts on our schedule, and specifically at the middle school. Each class was created with both an A and a B group, and they have followed the same schedule in School Tool and in their order of classes throughout the entire school year. But that has looked a little bit different at different grade levels. So at grade 6, they've been in the building 5 days a week throughout this entire school year, but those groups A and B have alternated between live in-class instruction with the teacher in the room with them, whereas the other cohort of that group was receiving their instruction via virtual stream into their classroom. The difference at grades 7 and 8 is that they still had those A and B cohorts, but one of the groups, A, for example, would receive instruction live in person on Mondays and Thursdays, while cohort B would then receive that live instruction here at school on Tuesdays and Fridays. So from this point forward, A and B groups will now be combined and will follow the same instructional schedule 5 days a week for all students in grades 6 through 8. In addition to that change, grade 7 will also change from a 4-period day to a 5-period day. And what that does is that increases our consistency between all of the grade levels. And that consistency allows us to offer some additional in-person instruction. And that'll be in the areas of art, family and consumer science, health, 7th grade seminar, STEM, and technology. All of these classes previously have either been remote or in a virtual format.
At the high school level, the changes will take place most significantly at the 9th and 10th grade levels, because the 9th and 10th graders will attend their classes 5 days a week instead of in the alternating hybrid schedule. Our juniors and seniors will continue with their hybrid schedule. So in order to make this work, we plan to expand the use of our 6-period option from 1:30 to 2:30. We're using that 6th period to provide support for students who are at risk of not earning course credit. And by that, I mean that 4 out of the 10 possible Regents exams will be offered this school year. But in order to earn a Regents diploma, students must pass the Regents class to earn the Regents credit. So by adding this 6th period option, we will be able to provide interventions and support for students who are struggling in algebra, living environment, earth science, and geometry. And that will help them have greater access and opportunity towards earning course credit for those Regents required classes. A small number of classes will need to shift to 6th period. This is because we need to account for shared middle school and high school teachers. We need to meet IEP requirements. And in some schedules where the A and B days can't combine, I will have to shift the class to 6th period. If that happens, a study hall may be added to a student's schedule. But in the end, the impact of those changes or the amount of changes that need to take place are minimal. I do have one elective at the high school level that will remain hybrid to maintain the cohorting. Project Lead the Way students, the 11th and 12th graders will continue with their current schedule. Our 9th grade students Project Lead the Way class actually starts at 8 a.m., but our classes here won't start until 8:30. So they will be able to have access to the 8 o'clock class. We'll get them in here earlier so that they can take the virtual Project Lead the Way class in our building and then transition right to their 8:30 class without losing any time. The 10th grade students class for Project Lead the Way runs until 2 o'clock, but our day ends at 1:30. So again, we'll provide the students the opportunity to remain for that 6th period so that they can take that class virtually, but not miss it because they'll be here in our building. The CTE schedules will maintain our current hybrid format, although I do intend to add in-person support for students who are at risk of not earning the course credit in the required Regents classes. For those students, we're talking about the ELA course and American history. Band lessons will also be offered in person. Our virtual lessons will continue for juniors and seniors and for students who may be more comfortable with that option.
So in conclusion to all of that, students in grades 11 and 12 will remain in their current hybrid model. Students in grades 6 through 10 will receive in-person instruction 5 days a week. These students will remain in cohorts, but those cohorts will just be a little bit larger in size. As Mr. Miller mentioned at the beginning, our goal all year has been to maximize in-person instruction. K-6 has been in person 5 days a week all year, and the 3 feet of distancing in classrooms allows us to extend this offering to students in grades kindergarten through 10th grade at what would arguably be the most critical point in the school year.
Thank you for everyone in attendance tonight. We now will turn to some of the questions to make sure that we've answered them. And I will throw some of them out there and then either I'll answer them or I'll throw it out to one of the principals. Thank you, Mr. Abbey. Thank you, Mr. Masso, and thank you, Mr. Crandall, as well, for coming tonight. One of the first questions was, will there be a continuing hybrid option going forward for kids who would prefer? You want me to take that, or you want one of you want to take it?
Me too, sure. Hybrid won't be an option for students in grades 6 through 10. However, students in 11th or 12th grade will actually remain as their in-person option in the hybrid model.
So I know that one of the questions was, why are we doing this now? And I think that the presentation answered that, although I think I'd reiterate it, that we believe in-person instruction is important. This is an important quarter of the year for credit recovery for our kids and getting them through the courses that they're in at the 612 building. So getting kids back in as much as possible is a really important thing at this time of year. One question was, is it possible for students to move from class to class instead of being in the same classroom?
So that is actually something that we are not planning on doing. And the rationale for that is basically since the beginning of this, the recommendation from both Department of Health and the CDC has been cohort whenever possible. And the rationale for that is that it significantly decreases the level of exposure our students are having to other people in the school. And that definitely helps to mitigate any potential exposure that they may have to COVID-19. So we know that in a 5-hour day, sitting in one classroom can definitely be something that is difficult to do. So our teachers all year long have taken that into account in their lesson planning, and will continue to do that in an increase from 2 to 5 days. There's been numerous conversations at this point already as to how can we break up that monotony for kids in a long day sitting in one room, and designing lessons around that to provide the variety. And as the weather increases, that also gives us a little bit more flexibility to provide breaks to students to go outside for a quick walk, to enjoy some of that sunshine, spread out outside, take a mask break, and things of that nature. So those are definitely conversations that we are having as to best get through that setting of being in one location and not traveling throughout the school during the day.
Ms. Masso, did you have anything to add to that? Or?
Yes, I will add that our 11th and 12th grade students already do move from classroom to classroom. That's one of the reasons that our 11th and 12th grade students will continue in the hybrid model, is because of the cohorts are not kept together in that way. They switch from classroom to classroom. It's because of the unique nature of the high school courses, the electives that they take. It's impossible to keep them all in line on the same schedule. We wouldn't want that in our education system. So the 11th and 12th grade students will continue as they have, and they do change classes in their hybrid schedule.
So one of the questions, it was 2 parts, but I think we just answered the second part. The first part, though, was, is this model supposed to mimic the in-person instruction for the next school year? And the answer to that is, well, we don't really know exactly what the school will look like next year. But really, this is designed to take the current system and maximize in-person instruction for what remains of this year. And we're hopeful that next school year is a much more normal schedule, both at the elementary and the high school and middle school level, meaning that it would be more of a traditional day with lunches and things along those lines. Do you guys have anything to add to that? There was a question about Project Lead the Way, but I believe you've answered it. So another question was about merging cohorts and what impact that has in terms of a full class. And what I like to think of this as is not merging cohorts, but enlarging the cohorts with the social distancing requirements. So we're trying to keep the 610 cohorts still cohorted, but we're just getting to a slightly larger cohort because we can socially distance down to 3 feet instead of 6. So we're still not mixing large populations together. We're just creating slightly larger cohorts and running almost exactly the same system. And then there is questions about sports. Why can sports go on if PE can't? And that's been a question that's troubled schools across the state. And it's simply because the athletics guidelines operate under different rules than the physical education guidelines for the state. And we are operating under CDC, DOH, and SED guidelines. And we're complying with them. Do you guys have anything to add to that? Question from a student: will full-time school affect the amount of schoolwork and homework?
I think that there's always, a give and take with that. I would imagine that, when we've been in a hybrid model with 2 in-person days, obviously there's been more work that's been expected for students to conduct independently on their own on their virtual days. So I would think that it would be more of a shift away from expecting them to take part in some of the lessons and have, and teachers have created a variety of ways for students to gain exposure in that virtual model. So a lot of that will go away, and it will shift more to what normal expectations in a normal school year would be. So I would imagine that there would still be homework from classes, but I think that it would be at a different level than what's expected and what's sent home on a virtual instruction day for a student.
There are some specific transportation requests in here, or questions about if I'm going to use transportation now and I didn't need it before. Those are kinds of questions that I would ask you to call your building principal about, or call the district office, one of the offices, to get that question answered. We will figure out the transportation issues associated with this. Some of that may occur that we're not aware of, or someone that hasn't been riding the bus all year we're fully aware that may occur, and we're prepared to work around how we need to make that happen. This is actually for Ryan. Since there are already many technology issues, including the internet crashing often, how do you plan how do you think the network will handle more students using it simultaneously?
That's it's honestly a very valid question. Right now that we are going to potentially have twice the number of students, and that means devices in classrooms, will our network support that added technology load? And the answer to that is, as best as we've been able to test, which is pretty thoroughly, we don't expect to see any sort of change for the technology performance for kids. We obviously realize that students are relying on your devices just about all the time now. And we have made a number of significant network improvements that the end user may not necessarily be able to see over the course of the last 8 to 12 months, in order to really streamline how our network works for all of our kids. But at the same time, there will certainly be technology issues and problems that arise. And if that, or when that is the case, I would simply encourage everyone, whether you are a student, a parent, or anyone else, anyone listening, to for students and parents, we have a technology support portal on the front page of our website. And regardless of the issues that you are dealing with, if they are at all technology related, please fill out that form, and someone on our technology team will reach out to you. We realize that we're relying on these devices so much more than we have in the past, and everyone has different levels of experience. And there's going to be not lots, but there certainly will be some unknowns that come up. And we are here to help you and work with you and figure out whatever technology problems that you have. So if you are someone who is experiencing a problem, please, students, community members, parents, go ahead and fill out the form that we have on our website, and we'll work with you as quickly as we can to resolve, any problems that you're experiencing.
So one of the questions is, why can't we go to a longer day immediately? If we're going to go back in person, why can't we go back immediately? Does one of you want to take that, or do you want me to handle it?
I can take that if you'd like. By expanding our school day, what that does is it makes it where the cohorts might end up mixing, the transition into hallways or greater exposures. Like what we have designed is with the intent of the DOH guidelines, following them to our best ability. And by expanding the day, what that expands is the potential for more exposure. We have a terrific staff that's been working hard to make sure our building is clean. We have teachers who have been working really hard to make sure that both the remote and live instruction is thorough and is meeting the prioritized standards. We feel that we have just tried to take the best of everything and consolidate it in a way that allows our students to remain as safe as you can be in a COVID environment. So expanding our day right now would just expand the potential for exposures. And we have designed a system that I feel has done a really good job of managing the risk and keeping our students in school. So by continuing this model and just maximizing the in-person opportunities, we will be able to continue to maintain the safety of our environment while still providing the best education that we can in COVID circumstances.
Mr. Abbey?
Yeah. One other variable that goes along with either our current schedule or lengthening the day would be adding lunch back into the in-person instructional day. And that is definitely something that is very difficult to navigate with a larger population, especially since while eating, masks are off and you have to maintain that 6 feet of distance. So to get all of our students safely through a cafeteria or lunch type setting is one of those additional variables that we feel strongly that if we're able to keep that outside of the school day for right now, that is another safety measure that we can have in place, and it has worked really well throughout the year so far. So we would like to remain with that at this time.
A question about quarantining. If somebody in the class gets COVID, will the whole 15+ kid class be quarantined? And there's a simple answer to that and a more complex answer to that. What we will do is work with DOH on quarantining, and they have actually changed the proximate contact definition for exposures in classrooms. So sometimes it'll depend on where a positive student or staff member was in the classroom relative to other students, because it's a certain number of feet that you have to be within that student. And then our teachers and our principals and our nurse will work with DOH to make that determination. But in present day terms, because of vaccinations, because of new rules about if you've had COVID within a certain amount of time, quarantining isn't as blanket as it was in September. So I can't really answer that question and say yes or no, because it's really going to be situational specific to the event. So that's another reason why now is a time when we can expand a little bit because of vaccinations, because staff are vaccinated, a large percentage of our staff are vaccinated. That allows us to still maintain staff. One of the reasons schools closed across the state was not because they couldn't operate, because the exposures to staff took so many staff out on quarantine that they couldn't supervise kids at school. So some of that problem is gone now, that kept schools from operationally being solvent at certain points in this year. Some students are saying that they have jobs and that they may conflict with this new time frame. How would you suggest a student or family that has that as an issue deal with it?
The job consideration is largely for something, it's something that affects the students in 11th and 12th grade. And because of the cohorting expectations and the guidelines, we have decided to continue with the hybrid model for the 11th and 12th grade. So I think that the continuation of the hybrid model for those grade levels will continue the flexibility that students have in their schedule for maintaining their work demands as well. So I think that that hybrid balance at 11th and 12th will address a lot of those issues.
There was a question about whether we would introduce COVID testing in our schools in conjunction with this. And the answer to the COVID testing question is the same as it was in September. We won't initiate COVID testing unilaterally. If DOH feels that COVID testing would be appropriate for our model, then that's what they would do. But we've worked with DOH for like the last 6 weeks on this plan behind the scenes, and they're comfortable with the plan as it is now, and they'll monitor everything that's going on in the county. And you know, if we need to initiate COVID testing, it would be in conjunction with the Department of Health. There was a math break question. Do either of you want to handle that? Like, our math break's going to still be available?
The guidance is clear that when students are in the classroom setting and they are 3 feet apart, that masks must be worn at all times. But that kind of goes back to what I had mentioned earlier about the idea of students, us being aware of the fact that students are going to be in one location for a significant amount of time. And teachers will work in opportunities. Now they'll have to be a little bit more creative when students are only 3 feet apart, such as taking those breaks by getting them outside so that they can properly space out when they do that. But as long as instruction is going on 3 feet apart, the masks must remain on, but people will be working those breaks in throughout the day.
When will students find out their schedules?
I think that really is targeted to the 9 through 12 level, because that's where some of the schedule shifts take place. Mm-hmm. And it would be my goal to get those to you as soon as possible. I started to talk to some classes today that might be affected by this. And I'm going to give myself a timeline of, middle of the week. By Wednesday, I will make sure that parents and students know if their schedule has changed as a result of this shift. I'm talking about it broadly, but we'll find that it's really just a handful of classes and a handful of students who may have to make some adjustments in the schedule. And Mrs. Manley and I will make sure that you know about those individually so that you're made aware of a schedule change. No news is good news, I guess. If you don't hear from us, it means your schedule has stayed the same. And I expect that a majority of student schedules will remain the same. We're really just combining the Monday, Thursday students and the Tuesday, Friday students with a few shifts to accommodate conflicts that occurred.
And at the middle school level, the changes are minimal. Any students that have already received resource instruction in what we call that 6th period, the 1:30 to 2:30, that will continue, and that will continue the 5 days a week. There are a few of like the additional in-person instruction with art, home careers, so on and so forth. And actually Mrs. Paul and myself are scheduled to go into classrooms throughout the remainder of this week to come in and make sure that students are able to ask any questions that they want and make sure that they're well informed about the changes that'll take place in the coming week.
Now, I know it was in your presentations, but there are still some questions about the beginning and end of the day. It still begins 8:30, unless you're in Project Lead the Way for some kids, which might start at 8. And it still ends at 1:30 for most students, but there are some students who have been in from 1:30 to 2:30, and maybe some more will get in the 1:30 to 2:30 timeframe. Does that sound about right? But the bulk of students' schedules are going to still be 8:30 to 1:30 on change. And any changes would get notified with, parents would be notified of those changes.
That is correct.
Yes.
Trying to hit a bunch of questions with that. Do you guys think I missed any of the questions from the list? Well, it is 7:05. I don't see any more questions on the list of questions. Hopefully people found the presentation informative and many questions were answered from the presentation. If you have additional questions or specific questions, please contact either the middle school office or the high school office, because I'm sure there are still some questions out there, and a lot of them probably should be handled that way. Like just asking what is the thing about transportation or schedules specific to you. And those are questions that I'm sure you'll get answers from the school if you call and ask or email and ask. With that, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Mr. Abbey and Ms. Tomaso for their time in doing the presentation, and Mr. Crandall, board president, for attending our meeting tonight, and Mr. Aurelio for organizing the electronics and making us all work, because I know I couldn't do it on my own, and for answering that impromptu question that he had to. Again, thank you all for your time, and we're all in this for the students and doing what's right for the kids, and we're doing things that we believe are the best for our kids, and we're doing them as safe as we possibly can. And we believe that this is the best plan for our kids for the remainder of the year. Thank you all for attending.